Are we live? I think so. There we go. Oh my goodness. Sorry about that, you guys. I'm glad you found the new live. Let me just post this in the I downloaded a new plugin and I guess I needed to have a new setting on to go live with it. But like, so I hit live and then it was like, because I'd done all the buttons to fix the problem, I had to essentially end the live. Such a bummer. But that's okay, we figured it out. Hello. Hi, Kelly. Hi, Pedro. Hi, Andrew. Hi, Wild. Hi, Dar. Hello, 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 hello. Okay. Welcome, my lords, to Isengard, or to the book club. To both. To both. I don't know. I'm usually pretty dead after work. I understand. Never touch a running system. I had to end it to get the stream to go up. I had no choice. I had no choice but to redo it. Let me just post this in community section. I think tonight is here. Just in case. I mean, if you're seeing the community section, you're probably seeing that we're live, but you know, just want to no. Not answer that. Okay, hello. Hi. How's everyone doing? I hope well. I don't know what it is about Mondays if I like don't use my voice enough, but I swear every time I get ready for this stream, I'm like suddenly like, oh, nope, I don't know how to talk anymore. And my like voice feels dull. I'm working on it. I don't know what it is. I hope you all are doing well. We're doing, oh my God, I'm just gonna, hold on. I'm trying to sign up for health insurance, but like my number got on a list, so I get like 80 calls a day. Hi, Juice. Hi. How are you? Okay, we're going over chapters Helm's Deep and The Road to Isengard. Next week, Monday, we are discussing the end of book 3. Which does mean we have 3 chapters to read for next week instead of just 2. So we'll just get that out of the way. We have Flotsam and Jetsam. Or is it Float Sam and Jet Sam? And then we have the Voice of Saruman. And then we have the Plantier. Oh, that makes sense. Yes. So Kelly, we'll hold your comment for next week. So we do have 3 chapters to read next week, but that will put book 3 of Two Towers to rest. Yeah, we'll do it next week since you mentioned on that. And I don't think there's there's not really a natural... We get a little bit of Aragon time in this week, but he's not like a main... Wild left a good comment about Aragon that we'll go over. We'll talk about something, but I don't know if this is like a natural week to talk about that. We'll save it for next week. You asked last time if anyone could see a way that Legolas's elf eyes could see the Tower of Guard from Adoras. In short, no. I think that at least Mount Mindolin is in the way, even if he has an angle past the other peaks. That or the dots on the map are mismarked, which is possible. Well, and there's also, from this week, we know that there's a darkness like spreading over the land that seems to hinder Legolas's vision, yeah? From here on out, there will be lots of plot changes in the movie without there being any major changes to the story. Should we talk about the first big major change? Because something that maybe I'm misremembering, but a big part of the movie, Two Towers movie, when they're on their way to Helm's Deep, they get into a little battle and Aragorn falls off a cliff. Right? It would have been interesting last week. I bet it'll be interesting next week though, Kelly. I have faith. We'll get to it, I promise. I think next week it'll have more, it'll fit in more naturally. I don't want it to like fall flat just because it's not part of like what we've read this week. Or not quite as like direct too. But I'm not misremembering that, am I? Because that's in Two Towers, I think. You know, I do have the memory of a goldfish. Someone called it that last week and I was like, that's it. That's what it is. The memory of a frickin' goldfish. No. Wild, I live for your posts. I live for them. That was a Peter Jackson change. Okay, thank you for confirming my... Hi, Brianna. Welcome in. Thank you for watching the GTA videos. Have you ever read the Lord of the Rings books? We're currently reading Two Towers. We don't read it live on stream. We'll read like little bits and pieces. But we don't read the whole thing because copyrights. That definitely happens in the movie. Okay, I was like, I know that happens in the movie, but I was like, was it Two Towers? Or for some reason I was like, maybe it was Return of the King. But I thought it was right before Helm's Deep, and it was. So that was a huge change to this week, which, you know, that I think I don't know. Now that I've read this story without that happening, I'm like, I wonder why they added that in. Cinematic heightening. That's a good way to say it. No, you've not read the Lord of the Rings books. They're very good. The Lord of the Rings story is just very good. We break it down by about 2 chapters every week. Okay, so that's the biggest change I remember from this week. But let me know if there were other big book to movie adaptation changes. You know, I think maybe that decision to like for the movie, it makes sense. Was it necessary? I don't know. Was it, as Kendra said, cinematic heightening by PJ? Yeah. It added like, did I cry a little? Yeah. as though there wasn't enough tension in the story without the casualty, right? He does a lot of stuff just because it looks cool on screen, and fair. I think you can say a lot of things about adaptions, and you're allowed to feel whatever way you feel about adaptions. I don't mind changes happening, because I think like you can tell a story so differently with visual senses versus reading. The way you can tell a story is so different. Like you can take up you can take up almost half of a chapter in a movie in like half a second, because sometimes Tolkien's descriptive writing is so expansive and you don't need a character in a movie giving you a 5-minute dialogue about how beautiful the scenery is or what it looks like where you are. So I find that to be interesting, and I really enjoyed my time in the movie, so like I'm not mad about it. But I was actually shocked to see that something that critical, or like what felt like such a huge critical moment in the movie, wasn't in the book. That felt a little bit whiplashy. One explanation I heard for the change was it gave the movie a way to tell the viewer that a large army was coming. Mm-hmm. I can see that. Dar. Like it does do that. You're so in. Hold on, let me say a real sentence. It's so true that in the movie we encounter that battle before we get to Helm's Deep, and that is a really great way to show that like the dangers and the foes are like all about Middle Earth. They're not just like localized in one spot. They're kind of everywhere. I can live with most changes in the movies, except the stupid idea about Anduril brought to Aragon by Elrond. Fair enough. Thanks for saying hey to everyone, Brianna. Everyone, welcome in, Brianna. And I'm not running Pete down for it. It does look cool. No, I hear you. I hear you. When switching media like this, I often give leeway. Some things don't translate. I'm with you there, Pedro. I have more leniency for it and more leniency and patience for changes than I notice some people do. And, you know, part of that I think is like a little bit of like goldfish brain in myself, because I don't know. Not necessarily that like I don't remember, like I clearly remembered that part of the movie and was shocked it wasn't in the book. But I don't know. There's so much to take in that I'm just like, okay, moving on. I know, Toodles, I'm so sorry. I downloaded a new plugin in OBS, and so when I went live today, it wouldn't let me go live. So but I started the live stream on the back end, but then it wouldn't push it through. So I had to end it and then change a setting that I couldn't change until the stream was ended. And then I had to go live again. But that meant I had to start an entirely new live link. So I apologize if anyone got lost. My father's partner can be seen as an extra. Really, Andrew? Behind Eowyn when Gimli is telling her about Aragon. So that's the reason for the because your father's partner needed to be in there. You like Andrew's explanation best? You know, I don't know. So our chapters today, a lot of what we read for this week is very it was a lot of like traveling. When did I start streaming? I've been streaming for like in general across other platforms since January 2021. But YouTube live streaming like 3 months. We just do Mondays book club. Okay, yeah, so with the Helm's Deep, we start by leaving Rohan, right? And then we make our way to Helm's Deep, and then we make our way to Isengard, and we end in Isengard. So let's talk about the journey from Helm's Deep, from Rohan to Helm's Deep to Isengard, because there's a lot that happens in there. I like how Wilde started it out with two chapters full of danger and drama. I'm okay with some changes, but some make me want to pull my hair out. you had that experience with the Harry Potter franchise. Still can't watch one scene in 6 without teeth gnashing. I understand that. I think there's a beauty to connecting to media, in that we all have these deeply personal and different connections to the stories that we love, whether it be games or books or movies, and then to see it adapted into something else. There's always going to be changes made in adaptations. And I guarantee that there's always going to be at least one change that feels like a personal attack. Well, maybe I shouldn't guarantee that, but I would venture to assume. In battle scenes in book take pages while the time is seconds. Interesting. See, I don't know. We should talk about the writing of we'll go over some of the writing of the battle, because like Wild said, it sounded a little poetic, and there definitely were some moments I felt like the book made it seem faster than the movie did. So that's a different feeling, different perspective. And a little battle at Helm's Deep. Don't forget that. Wait, expand on that, Kendra. In the books and the movies, adapting wise, Arc, hello. So let's go page by page, break down some of my favorite lines that Tolkien gifted us with this week, because we again get some of Tolkien's best descriptive work, for better or worse. You know how I feel about it. I generally love his descriptive work. Sometimes it's laborious to read some of his descriptive work, but still I have love and respect for it. You think the battle seems almost a footnote in the chapter, whereas it takes up like half the film. Yeah, I feel the same, Wild. I feel the battle in the film was much more drawn out and lengthy, where the book, it felt very like, I found myself reading the Helm's Deep chapter and being like, how can we finish this battle in 20 pages? Well, just about every book reader I talk to hates that scene, the Helm's Deep. My niece actually stood up in the theater and hollered, "That didn't happen in the book." Oh gosh, you can't replace that kind of passion. Oh, well, no. We're starting at the beginning of Helm's Deep, so we haven't gotten to Helm's Deep yet, Kendra. Don't worry. We're starting with the traveling to Helm's Deep. We're right at the beginning. Don't worry. There's a lot of traveling in this book, but first we have to get to Helm's Deep. I hear you. Have no fear. Oh, yes. In the movie, you can show a swing of a sword in 0.5 seconds, but you need 5 sentences in writing. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Because I think and we'll get to Helm's Deep in a second, but like the battle in the book, the battle in the movie, you get to see like all these moments and steps, and it really is kind of broken down a lot more. In the book, it's much more like, okay, and then they broke the wall and we retreated. But I hear what you're saying, yeah. Okay, so we start out Helm's Deep. We're coming from Rohan. Technically, we're coming from Adoris. We're headed towards Helm's Deep. And Andrew had a good moment of pose in the community section today, about the beginning of this chapter, fearing to come too late, which that gave me a little bit of a giggle, Andrew. So Swift and enduring were the steeds of Rohan. So we get this language of like, there's this fear. So the host rode on, need drove them, fearing to come too late. They rode with all the speed they could, pausing seldom. So I wrote down that this sounds really grueling and desperate. There's this desperate need to like push past the human boundaries, because now we're with like a large group of men. So whereas before we've had like one or two men and an elf and hobbits and wizards and Gimli. Why can't I think of what Gimli is? Oh my god. Shh, don't tell him. Don't tell him. But so we've had all these like different kinds of races with us, right? But now we're with mostly men. So we have these very like human needs. We need food, we need water, we need more rest than the average other character we come up against. We need more rest than orcs, that's for sure. Gimli is a dwarf, thank you. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so apologize, Gimli. Brain of a goldfish. It's always when you need the word, it doesn't come out of your mouth. I was like, what is Gimli? Is Gimli. Some of my best friends laugh at me because I didn't realize Legolas was played by Orlando Bloom. But historically, I don't generally recognize who characters are in movies. I mostly just like know their character name at best, but like I don't know what famous person is playing them, especially in a movie like this where like that's not what Orlando Bloom looks like. I mean, obviously it is him, but they always, two of my girlfriends always give me a good sparring because they're always like, and Legolas, played by Legolas. And I'm like, yep. Legolas, played by Legolas. Who else would play him? So, you know, that's a little peek inside my brain. So we have this grueling hike to Helm's Deep. We have this desperation within the group. And we take a rest. But the one thing to note is Gandalf drops back to Legolas and asks him what he can see, because Legolas has this ability to see things that other men or others can't. He has a different kind of vision. And Gandalf specifically asks if he can see anything towards Isengard. And Legolas takes a look out and he says, I can see a darkness. There are shapes moving in it, great shapes far away upon the bank of the river, but what they are I cannot tell. It is not mist or cloud that defeats my eyes. There is a veiling shadow that some power lays upon the land, and it marches slowly downstream. It is as if the twilight under endless trees were flowing downwards from the hills. And behind us comes a very storm of Mordor, said Gandalf. It will be a black night. So my question here is this darkness like the spreading of the dark energy? I always forget to update that. Next book club is Monday. Obviously not the 6th, but a week from today, we're discussing the last 3 chapters of book 3. Gimli is a special dwarf, champion of the Lady of the Golden Forest. And they can tell a sparrow from a finch a league off. Yes, Andrew, you always come in with the best quotes to pull it all back together. So I guess my question is there is like some kind of like, there's some moments in the writing here where I can't tell if Tolkien is trying to like show us the world around, or if he's telling us what's happening in other locations. So like, is this Tolkien, like, is this Legolas seeing the trees moving, or is the veiling shadow like a darkness that's spreading over the land? You always thought it's the shadow over the Hurons. Yeah. Interested to hear your guys' thoughts. And that's the interesting thing about reading too, is that like the first time I read it, I was like, oh, there's this, I said, a veiling shadow cast on the land. And now that I'm reading it out loud, I'm like, but it could be the trees. It could be the Ents, right? Both. Yeah. But also we hear that the heaviness in the air has increased. And then in the last red glow, men in the vanguard saw a black speck, a horseman riding back towards them. They halted, awaiting him. And this man comes up, asks if Eomer is here, because he believes that, he says, things have gone evilly since Theodred fell, which from last week, Theodred had been under the spell of Wormtongue, and he was very like decrepit and like hunched over and not at all strong. And so now we see him like being able to ride a horse, and this spell that was cast over him was kind of washed away thanks to Gandalf and thanks to just like pulling him out of it. And Wormtongue, remember, had left us. So this rider comes up, doesn't know all of this, of course, because he's been out and he's seen many perish, and he's seen a lot of great loss. So Theoden has like kind of held back for a second, and then he comes forward and tells the man to stand before him, and then invites the man to ride with them to Erkenbrand. That's right. The shadow around Isengard is the Ents, if you check the timeline in the books. Yeah. When I was reading it out loud, I was like, I guess it could be the Ents. I took the darkness as the smokes and steams from the Battle of Isengard. Oh, so you took it. Yeah. I mean, that's possible for sure. There is some shadow. Merry and Pippin couldn't see them move clearly as well, and they were much closer. The Ents. I've always seen it as foreshadowing of the darkness from Mordor. That's kind of how it came across to me at first, Jonathan. Simply because Legolas has always been more foresightful with his vision. Yeah. That's kind of why it stuck out to me as something more than just like the Ents. And perhaps both. In the book, Theodred is killed at the first Battle of Fords of Isen, the day before the day before in the book. Originally? Theodred is Theoden's son. Thank you. That was the piece missing in my brain. You're right. That's the book. I will say he's a very forgettable moment in the book. I think he gets like half a line. Thank you, Paris. Thank you, everyone. Yes, you're right. Yep. I very much like me to see a TH name and be like, okay, same name, same person. But to my credit, Theodred got like half a line. I don't think that his part was written well into the book at all. Much more rememberable in the movies. It's the walking trees and a foreshadowing at the same time. That the Ents go to war means something that didn't happen for many thousands of years. Yes. Yep. Yeah, well, even just the Ents going is such a message. The story of the two battles at the Ford of Isen is told explicitly in unfinished tales. Thank you all. Thank you. Okay. Theodred is Theoden's son. Right. So since Theodred had fell, but last that man had been there, he had believed Theoden to be kind of decrepit and unable. So Um, Hi. Sorry, my cat is like staring at you. Or staring at me. Okay. Okay. So all of that aside, now that people are, hey, can you go somewhere? I love you. You're distracted. Go, go, go. Go, go. Go, go, go. Go, go. You can sit in my lap, but if you start to scratch me, I'm putting you down. Oh, perfect. Perfect time for an ad while I take care of cat. Okay. 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 We move on. So we've had this veiling shadow. It's the end, but it's also this kind of, or I'm taking it as this foreshadowing, but also like foreboding of darkness that is spreading over the land. Hi, Carlos. Yes, he is the cutest, and he loves hugs and to be in my personal space, and I love him so much. But he will probably start like clawing into me, so I will probably put him down here in a second. Okay. Okay. Yep. You gotta go. I'm working. Okay, love you. Okay, so this is where a little mysterious, right? Because Gandalf decides that he's going to depart from the group, and he does so in a very Gandalf way. He tells Theoden and the group to ride to Helm's Deep. Go not to the ford of Icent, and do not tarry in the plain. I must leave you for a while. Shadowfax must bear me now on a swift errand. And then he just leaves. While he does tell Aragorn and Éomer to await him at Helm's Gate. So he spoke a word to Shadowfax, and like an arrow from the bow, the great horse sprang away. Even as they looked, he was gone. A flash of silver in the sunset, a wind over the grass, a shadow that fled and passed from sight. Snowmane snorted and reared, eager to follow, but only a swift bird on the wing could have overtaken him. You have 3 hyper chihuahuas. And on a strategic level, and that's why Gandalf gets so hasty, is the Ents moving means everything changed. And they have actually a chance of winning if he is fast enough. Oh, Kelly with the facts. Wormtongue, were he here, would not find it hard to explain. True enough, but for myself, will wait until I see Gandalf again. Yes, so there's questions, obviously, amongst the group about where he's gone. But we move on. We make it to Helm's Deep, I was so shocked. I like when I was reading this again, this was probably so far the most shocking movie to book change that I wasn't expecting, because it felt so natural in the movie, I think, which says a lot to the change. I was like, when's Aragorn gonna fall? And when's this battle before Helm's? I was like waiting for the battle before we get to Helm's Deep to happen. But alas, it does not. For that was a change and the adaptation. So we get this beautiful, but also kind of haunting, I suppose more haunting than beautiful description as we embark into Helm's Deep. But we get the note that at Helm's Gate, before the mouth of the deep, there was a heel of rock thrust outward by the northern cliff. There upon its spur stood high walls of ancient stone, and within them was a lofty tower. Men said that in the far-off days of the glory of Gondor, the sea kings had built here this fastness with the hands of giants. Beneath it, by a wide culvert, the deepening stream passed out. About the feet of the horn rock it wound, and flowed then in a gully through the midst of a wide green gore. Yeah, Wild. I too was wondering what exactly does he learn in that exchange that makes him ride off, because it is pretty mysterious. Yeah, I agree. The geography names are a bit confusing. Helms versus Gate versus Deep. Yes. Yes. And I'm not going to say that first D word on camera because I know it's not the slur, but I don't, with a lot of like YouTube stuff, it's done via AI. And so I don't want to get a flag on my channel for them thinking that I'm saying hateful words. Unfortunately. How does the book flow for you? Well, I mean, I don't know if I can speak to that at this moment, Vincent, because one thing about how I'm reading it for a book club is that I'm reading 2 chapters at a time and then I don't pick it back up for a few days. And so my reading of it is very like halted and has like a stop and a start. But I will say, like, it is a slower read. Like, I don't necessarily, but I'm also reading it with like a highlighter and a pen. The reading experience of this is not how I would normally read a book, so I can't give like a fair answer to that. The Sea Kings were the founders of Gondor, Elendil's descendants. That is a great background bit, Dar. Thank you. As you read, the fortress at Helm's Deep was built by the Gondorians rather than the Rohirrim. Yeah. I've always felt that Gandalf knew that they were going to need help, and I feel he was given help by his master in the form of a vision. I like that for Gandalf. Yeah. Gandalf is even more enigmatic than Dumbledore, and both know how to keep their own counsel very well. I can't speak to Dumbledore. I actually never read the books and haven't seen the movies. But I will also say, so speaking just for Lord of the Rings, Gandalf is, since becoming Gandalf the White versus Gandalf the Grey, he's much more elusive. He does seem to be way more elusive now in his return than previous, in my opinion. Okay, so pretty swiftly we make it to Helm's Deep and we get, it almost was like too fast. We got set up inside. I didn't even realize we were there. So we get there, we ask, who asks this? Or we're approaching it rather. And what has become of Erkenbrand none seem to know. It is likely that he will be overtaken ere he can reach Helm's Gate, if he has not already perished. Oh, so this scout comes up. Has aught been seen of Gandalf? Asked Theoden. Yes, Lord. Many have seen an old man in white upon a horse, passing hither and thither over the plains like wind in the grass. Some thought he was Saruman. It is said that he went away ere nightfall towards Isengard. Some say also that Wormtongue was seen earlier going northward with a company of orcs. So we've got Gandalf out there running around like wind in the grass. Some thought it was Saruman, which maybe it could have been, but we believe him to have retreated back to Isengard, right? And then I swear, I do not know where my voice goes on Mondays. So, but then we also still have news of Wormtongue. Okay, This, though, it will go ill with Wormtongue if Gandalf comes upon him, said Theoden. Nonetheless, I miss now both my counselors, the old and the new. But in this need, we have no better choice than to go on, as Gandalf said, to Helm's Gate. Whether Erkenbrand be there or no, it is known how great is the host that comes from the north. Then let us be swift, said Éomer. Let us drive through such foes as are already between us and the fastness. There are caves in Helm's Deep where hundreds may lie hid, and secret ways lead thence up on the hills. Trust not to secret ways, said the king. Saruman has long spied out this land. Still in that place our defense may last long. Let us go. Film difference. Éomer is with them. Gandalf is not off trying to find Éomer in the book. Oh, you're good, Toodles. You're good. He in the book, he just says he's going off. He returns with Erkenbrand. Couldn't have been Saruman on a horse like Shadowfax. Confusion because Gandalf is wearing white now. Gandalf is searching for Erkenbrand and his men. They were scattered at battle at the fords. I mean, and sure, but I think, there's always... I think in the writing, there's this possibility of, well, it could have been. We have more... I mean, and yes, I believe it was Gandalf, right? But, it's like the night that the three were... outside of Fangorn, and they see a man in white, and they thought it was Saruman or Gandalf, and it was Saruman. Yeah, he's looking for Erkenbrand in the books. So, part of the experience of the reading is that there's a journey to reading and the writing that I think is worth while we know the truth one way or another, whether it be from the movies or whether it be because we found the truth in the writing eventually, there are these moments in the writing where things aren't for certain. So we know it was Gandalf, right? But this idea that other people thought that it was Saruman is still a worthy point of conversation and still a worthy point of discussion. I mean, I think we have more foresight than we give ourselves credit for. So we write things off a lot easier when we know the story so well, because it's not Saruman because Saruman's in Isengard. So I think it's valid that we still leave this room as the story unfolds for less certainty, because I do think part of what happens when you read a story where you already know the ending is that you we wouldn't need to discuss anything if we just took everything at end value. So we need to make sure and I try to do my best, but we need to make sure we take things at written value in the moment we're at versus steaming forward. Now we can obviously be okay, but we know it was Gandalf, but leaving that little bit of magic, which is also sometimes fear and curiosity and suspense, because otherwise if we just take everything at end value, then there's no point in going through the story. Who is Erkenbrand? The Éomer Erkenbrand switch is usually pretty jarring for people that have only seen them. Yeah, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm Erkenbrand is I don't. Yeah, but and also we do try to keep book club a safe space for people who are new to the books, as best as possible. Just to, I know usually like everyone that's chatting is like very familiar with the stories, but just in case people pop in and watch it later on, I want it to be like as safe for them to enjoy it as like a new to the story. Maybe they've not seen the movies. Yeah, in the book they seem to ride right into the battle. Yeah, so let's get to that point because it honestly, I agree, because we get to Helm's Deep and then it's pretty, yeah, quickly Éomer set his men in readiness. Yeah, intentionally introduces ambiguity. Yeah. Yep, love that. Erkenbrand is a marshal of one of the regions of Rohan, has a large following that is loyal to him. Okay, thank you. Yeah, Erkenbrand, one thing that I love about Tolkien, but also that can be, I think, overwhelming for new readers of him, is that like there's so much depth to every single character for the most part, and he doesn't, of course, leave that all in the writing. Sometimes you find it in the appendix, sometimes you find it in the Silmarillion, and like, but they don't necessarily introduce a new character and like introduce him in a way that's like, okay, now I know who Erkenbrand is. So all of a sudden I'm just hearing like the name Erkenbrand and I'm like, who the fuck is Erkenbrand? Erkenbrand holds similar title in the Westfold. Erkenbrand is a lord of the Westfold, the western part of Rohan, and he's based at Helm's Deep. Okay, perfect. Thank you all. Thank you. And this is why I love book club. Okay, so we get here and there were clefts in the stone through which men could shoot. So Éomer set his men into readiness. We have this little moment, this pause, this little break, right, between Gimli and Legolas, who I think we get a good bit of shining from the friendship that is Gimli and Legolas in these two chapters we read this week. And the first one is that they have this playful banter before the battle here begins. Gimli stood leaning against the breastwork upon the wall. Legolas sat above on the parapet, fingering his bow and peering out into the gloom. "This is more to my liking," said the dwarf, stamping on the stones. "Ever my heart rises as we draw near the mountains. There is good rock here. This country has tough bones. I felt them in my feet as we came up. Give me a year and 100 of my kin, and I would make this place that armies would break upon like water." I do not doubt it. So also the phrase break upon like water is so good. "I do not doubt it," said Legolas, "but you are a dwarf, and dwarves are strange folk. I do not like this place, and I shall like it no more by the light of day. But you comfort me, Gimli, and I am glad to have you standing nigh with your stout legs and your hard axe." Is Legolas flirting with Gimli? He's not, but like that was kind of, the way that I read that was kind of like, okay, brows. "They are burning as they come, cotton tree." Yep. Which is, they do such a good job of like bringing in this. So Gimli and Legolas are sitting there kind of joking around, and then it says, "A slow time passed. Far down in the valley, scattered fires still burned. The host of Isengard were advancing in silence now." Yeah. There's a noticeable impatience when you return to the book. The tempo of movies somehow messes with the expectation. I think I agree. I almost think like, I mean, sure, some would say you've got to read first, movie then, and then read again, but it's almost like the second time reading is almost like more enjoyable. Like I find myself like, I find myself really enjoying how it progresses in book club. And sometimes when I'm reading, I'm like, okay, get on with it. But I respect it all the same. The bromance of Legolas and Gimli in the books is so much more pronounced and deeper. I agree. I think it's one of my favorite joys of the books. And it's so interesting in contrast because in the movies, the friendship of Sam and Frodo shines through so deeply and is so important to me. But in the book, it's Gimli and Legolas for me. Although, to be fair, in Two Towers, we don't get a lot of Frodo and Sam. You can read Tolkien 10 times and still notice stuff you haven't noticed before. Amen to that. Amen to that. Okay, so the enemy's at hand. It's past midnight. The sky was utterly dark, and the stillness of the heavy air foreboded storm. Arrows thick as the rain came whistling over the battlements and fell clinking and glancing on the stones. Some found a mark. The assault on Helm's Deep had begun, but no sound or challenge was heard within. No answering arrows came. So there's this haunting silence from within Helm's Deep. The assailing host halted, foiled by the silent menace of rocks and wall. Ever and again, the lightning tore aside the darkness. Then the orcs screamed, waving spear and sword and shooting a cloud of arms at any that stood revealed upon the battlements. And the men of the mark, amazed, looked out, as it seemed to them, upon a great field of dark corn, tossed by a tempest of war, and every ear glinted with barbed light. Now, in the community section, Wilde had noted that the prose for the battle is strangely poetic, and I think we just heard a good example of that. Like, the first line, arrows thick as the rain came whistling over the battlements. Come on. I feel like the writing of this almost doesn't give it justice for the battle that happened. Like it almost like makes it feel like this like whimsical, easy battle, which of course it's not. And we get little moments of understanding that it's not. But we finally do start to fight back. Then at last an answer came. A storm of arrows met them, and a hail of stones. They wavered, broke, and fled back, and then charged again, broke and charged again, and each time, like the incoming sea, they halted at a higher point. So the orcs are getting closer. Aragorn and Éomer and Aragorn stood together on the deepening wall. They heard the roar of voices and the thudding of the rams, and then, in a sudden flash of light, they beheld the peril of the gates. So Aragorn grabs Éomer and he's like, come with me. This is the hour when we draw swords together. So they go to defend the door, and both Éomer and Aragorn have would you call it a battle cry? Give me a row of orc necks and room to swing, and all weariness will fall from me. Yes. Gimli's like, I'm a little tired, but I'll shake it off once I have an orc neck. Reading Tolkien for over 50 years and still find new insights. It's such a large collection of work, too. A lot of the battle writing in the series and poetry about it is Tolkien trying to process the horrors that he saw in the trenches of World War I. You know, and if I had lived through something like that, perhaps too, I would write it more poetically than realistically. I mean, not that there isn't realism in the writing, or well, he doesn't get too gruesome with it, in my opinion, which I prefer. I'm grateful for. So Gathwin, cried Éomer. Anduril, cried Aragorn. Charging from the side, they hurled themselves upon the wild men. Anduril rose and fell, gleaming with white fire. A shout went up from wall and tower. Anduril, Anduril goes to war. The blade that was broken shines again. Dismayed, the rammers let fall the trees and turned to fight, but the wall of their shields was broken as by a lightning stroke, and they were swept away, hewn down, or cast over the rock into the stony stream below. The orc archers shot wildly and then fled. So we have this moment, halted before the gates. Éomer and Aragon think everything is going to be okay, right? We did not come too soon, said Aragon, looking at the gates. The great hinges and iron bars were wrenched and bent. Many of the timbers were cracked. The doors will not withstand another such battering. Yet we cannot stay here beyond the walls to defend them, said Éomer. Look. He pointed to the causeway. Already a great press of orcs and men were gathering again beyond the stream. Come, we must get back and see what we can do to pile stone and beam across the gates within. They turned and ran. At that moment, some dozen orcs that had lain motionless among the slain leaped to their feet and came silently and swiftly behind. Two flung themselves to the ground at Éomer's heels, tripped him, and in that moment they were on top of him. But a small dark figure that none had observed sprang out of the shadows and gave a hoarse shout, Baruch Kazad, Kazad Imenu. An axe swung and swept back. Two orcs fell headless, and the rest fled. So we have this beautiful moment of Gimli coming in to save the day. He'd followed them all along, but he realized, he said that the battle seemed over large for him. So he sat beside a stone to see the swordplay of Éomer and Aragon, but was able to come in and kill two and scare the others off in the end. And I just think it's this beautiful moment for Gimli. Dwarf tossing is the best. What do you mean, Eric? This is the hour when yes, line given to, oh, that line was given to Theoden in the film. Oh. So it's Theoden to Aragon, because Gandalf's searching for Éomer. I apologize. Oh, never mind. I know what you mean by dwarf tossing. Yes. Re the postern door. Together, Éomer and Aragon sprang through the door, their men close behind. And as it turns out, Gimli, this is the Aragon and Gimli toss me swordy in the film. Yes. When there's that gap. And Gimli had mentioned in, was it Khazad-dûm, where they were escaping from the shadow thing, and in the film Gimli does not want to be tossed. He's like, no man will toss a dwarf. The dwarves, axes of the dwarves are upon you. And the dwarves are, everyone gets their like little moment of heroics. We see Aragon, we see Andúril, we see Gimli, we see Éomer, we see even Legolas. I don't know why I said even Legolas. Of course we see Legolas. He's a master of the bow. So the ladders go up by the orcs. The orcs creep like rats through the culvert. And the men of Rohan are growing weary. All their arrows are spent, and every shaft has been sought. Their swords are notched, and their shields were riven. 3 times Aragon and Éomer rallied them, and 3 times Andúril flamed in a desperate charge that drove the enemy from the wall. Their onset was fierce and sudden, and the orcs gave way before them. Ere long, they were hemmed in the narrows of the gorge, and all were slain or driven shrieking into the chasm of the deep, to fall before the guardian of the hidden caves. Okay, so I'm trying to... We get through a good bit of the battle, right? but I'm just trying to see where the wording is. Okay, well, we do have this moment. Have we had... No, not yet. Okay, so before they blast the wall, we have this moment with Aragon. And Wilde had specifically called this out too. So Aragon has this moment where he longs for home. And he says, nonetheless, day will bring hope to me. It is not said that no foe has ever taken the Hornburg if men defended it. So the minstrel said Eomer, then let us defend it and hope. So we have this moment that seems kind of like hope lacking. You didn't like how Gimli was turned into comic relief? What do you mean by that? Gimli is a serious badass. Being the comic relief in the movies takes that a bit away. Oh. You don't think one can be both comedic and strong and a badass? I think there's duality in that. Hundreds of ladders were lifted up. That is a strong image from the film. Yes, that quote immediately called upon the film to me. I agree. I think every story needs, especially a story like this, would be harder to read or harder to experience. It would not be the experience that it is if not for a lighthearted, unserious character. I in no way think that takes away his stronger moments. I think Gimli is one of the most... I almost think they played down Gimli being kind of a goof in the movies. I don't know. He's very lighthearted and unserious in the books, but I don't think that takes away from him being strong. In the movie, Legolas outshines Gimli by far in combat. In the book, they are on equal footing. Different axe and box, but equal. See, but I think they're the same in the movie. There's even I have to disagree with you, because even when they're at Helm's Deep, Gimli is up by 1 on their little battle of who's winning, how many people they've killed, and Legolas has to kill the guy that Gimli is quite literally sitting on. So I think there's many ways that they show that Gimli is just as strong of a fighter. But I think potentially just like imagery wise and cinematically, watching a dwarf like use an axe maybe wouldn't have been as believable in the visual setting, and so they made some decisions there. But I mean, you are valid in how the experience is for you. And I feel differently. And that's okay. We don't have to take in the story and feel the same way about it. That's why it's called adaptation. Well, I don't necessarily think that the adaptation of Gimli is different from the book. I feel that the adaptations of the characters feels true to book. Aragorn feels right. Legolas feels right. Merry and Pip feel spot on. Book to movie. Okay, so we have this moment where Aragorn kind of feels like he's losing hope. He's like almost begging for hope to stay with him, is how it came across to me. And then we have the blast in the wall, and the orcs, a host of dark shapes pour in. Devilry of Saruman, cried Aragorn. They have crept in the culvert again while we talked, and they have lit the fire of Orthanc beneath our feet. Elendil, Elendil, he shouted as he leaped down into the breach. But even as he did so, 100 ladders were raised against the battlements. Yes. So, and again, the writing here is like almost so fast and so like it flows in such a way that it like seems like this battle is easy, but it is in no way easy. So they make a decision to retreat up the stairs. Aragorn stumbles in his weariness, and the orcs leap forward and seize him. And Legolas uses his last arrow to go into the throat of one of the orcs, but the rest sprang over him. Then a great boulder, cast from the outer wall above, crashed down upon the stair and hurled them back into the deep. Aragorn gained to the door, and swiftly it clanged to behind him. And here he says, "Things go ill, my friends." "Ill enough," said Legolas, "but not yet hopeless, while we have you with us." "Where's Gimli?" "I do not know," said Aragorn. "I last saw him fighting on the ground behind the wall, but the enemy swept us apart." So a couple important things here. Legolas is being our beacon of hope and stepping up to be a reminder that like when it's not hopeless yet, when Aragorn is having these moments of doubt. But we also have lost Gimli, at least in presence. Saruman invented black powder, something new in Middle-earth. There's a buildup of tension in the battle. In the BBC radio adaptation, they emphasize this by modulating the music key up in the soundtrack. "If he wins back to the caves, he will pass your count again," laughed Aragorn. "Yes. I saw him last fighting on the ground behind the wall, but the enemy swept us apart. Alas, this is evil news." "He is stout and strong," said Aragorn. "Let us hope that he will escape back to the caves. There he would be safe for a while, safer than we. Such a refuge would be to the liking of a dwarf." So, there to his dismay, Aragorn now passed into the citadel. There to his dismay, he learned that Éomer had not reached the Hornburg. So we're missing Éomer, we're missing Gimli, we're losing hope. The Deeping Wall is taken, and we know that the orcs have this blasting fire. And Theoden says, "It is said that the Hornburg has never fallen to assault, but now my heart is doubtful. The world changes, and all that once was strong now proves unsure. How shall any tower withstand such numbers and such reckless hate? Had I known that the strength of Isengard was so great, maybe I should not so rashly have ridden forth to meet it. For all the arts of Gandalf, his counsel seems not now so good as it did under the morning sun." Again, these like pleas for hope, these pleas for respite almost. But Aragorn had mentioned that there was hope in dawn, right? In dawn rising again. And so hope there was. So the roar and a blast of fire, the archway and the gate above, which he had stood monument before, crumbled and crashed in smoke and dust. The barricade was scattered as if by a thunderbolt. Aragorn ran to the king's tower. But even as the gate fell and the orcs about it yelled, preparing to charge, a murmur arose behind them, like a wind in the distance, and it grew to a clamor of many voices, crying strange news in the dawn. The orcs upon the rock, hearing the rumor of dismay, wavered and looked back, and then, sudden and terrible from the tower above, the sound of the great horn of Helm rang out. Do not judge the counsel of Gandalf until all is over. Yes. All that heard that sound trembled. Many of the orcs cast themselves on their faces and covered their ears with their claws. Back from the deep the echoes came, blast upon blast, as if on every cliff and hill a mighty herald stood. But on the walls, men looked up, listening with wonder, for the echoes did not die. Ever the horn blast wound on among the hills. Nearer now, and louder they answered, one to another, blowing fierce and free. Helm, helm, the riders shouted. Helm is arisen and come back to war. Helm for Theoden king. And with that shout, the king came. His horse was white as snow, golden was his shield, and his spear was long. At his right hand was Aragon, Elendil's heir. Behind him rode the lord of the house of Errol the Young. Light sprang in the sky, night departed. Forth airlings, with a cry and a great noise they charged. Down from the gates they roared, over the causeway they swept, and they drove through the host of Isengard as a wind among grass. Behind them from the deep came the stern cries of men issuing from the caves, driving forth the enemy. Out poured all the men that were left upon the rock, and ever the sound of blowing horns echoed in the hills. On they rode, the king and his companions, captains and champions, fell or fled before them. So King Theoden rode from the Helm's Gate and clove his path to the great dike. There the company halted. Light grew bright about them. Shafts of the sun flared above the eastern hills and glimmered on their spears. But they sat silent on their horses, and they gazed down upon the deeping comb. The land had changed. Where before the green dale had lain, its grassy slopes lapping the ever-mounting hills, there now a forest loomed. Great trees, bare and silent, stood, rank on rank. So we see this forest that was not there before, and then suddenly upon a ridge appeared a rider clad in white, shining in the rising sun. Over the low hills the horns were sounding. Behind him, hastening down the long slopes, were a 1,000 men on foot, their swords with their hands. Amid them strode a man tall and strong. His shield was red, and he came to the valley's brink. Erkenbrand. So now Erkenbrand and Gandalf and the forest of Fangorn, or the forest, the trees, have arrived. And the terror of his coming filled the enemy with madness. The wild men fell on their faces before him. The orcs reeled and screamed and cast aside both sword and spear. Like a black smoke driven by a mounting wind they fled. Wailing, they passed under the waiting shadows of trees, and from that shadow none ever came again. Helm Hammerhand, is that who the helm is named after? Was one of the kings of the Mark about 260 years ago. He was laid in one of the mounds we see before the Golden Hall. He was named Hammerhand because he killed a man with one punch of the fist. Which one, Eric? Helm Hammerhand or Erkenbrand? Yeah, I do feel a change that I appreciate is that they didn't include every named character in the books in the movies. Honestly, I think it would have been overwhelming. In that instance, I do think better to pare down than to stay true. You catastrophe indeed with the arrival of Gandalf and Erkenbrand and the trees. Yeah, Erkenbrand. Yeah, in the movies, Gandalf is out looking for Éomer, who in the book is already with us at Helm's Deep. So quite interesting indeed. But I think if of all the characters you could eliminate, I understand why. You know, adaptations have to be made. A Yule catastrophe indeed. Okay, so we're moving on to the road to Isengard. And this chapter's honestly pretty straightforward. I feel like on it, for the most part, this chapter was spent kind of reiterating what we already know. But what has happened to Gimli? Well, we haven't gotten there yet. That comes in the next chapter. Yes, so right at the beginning of the road to Isengard, in the light of the fair morning, King Theoden and Gandalf the White Rider met again upon the green grass beside the deepening stream. There was also Aragorn, son of Arathon, and Legolas the elf, and Erkenbrand of Westfold, and the lords of the Golden House. About them were gathered the Rohirrim, the riders of the Mark. Wonder overcame their joy and victory, and their eyes were turned towards the wood. Suddenly there was a great shout, and down came those who had been driven back into the deep. There came Gamling the Old, and Eomer son of Aemond, and beside them walked Gimli the dwarf. He had no helm, and about his head was a linen band stained with blood, but his voice was loud and strong. 42, Master Legolas, he cried. Alas, my axe is notched. The 42nd had an iron collar on his neck. How is it with you? You have passed my score by 1, answered Legolas, but I do not grudge you the game, so glad am I to see you on your legs. And lots more named characters to be eliminated in the movie to come. You were wanting to increase the tension? It worked. I liked it, Andrew. Re the never-ending struggle to remember Rohirrim. Behind the scenes, some of the versions that Tolkien played with the drafting, Rohir Wraith, Rohir Koth, Rohir Hoth, Rochan, Rohan, Eomark. What is interesting in most stories, you have a plot idea, it goes wrong. The protagonists figure out a new way and then win. Tolkien's story is based much more in things nobody expected and ... I'm waiting, Kelly. It is a very complex story. Good or bad, they changed a lot. The Balrog was a bad surprise, but without the Balrog, no Gandalf the White. Yeah. There's there's such little loss for how many things go wrong. Truthfully. Okay. So the band is back together again. And everyone looks to Gandalf for explanation on the trees, and he said, Nay, I see the wood as plainly as do you, but that is no deed of mine. It is a thing beyond the counsel of the wise, better than my design, and better even than my hope. The event has proved. Then if not yours, whose is the wizardry? Said Theoden, not Saruman's, that is plain. Is there some mightier sage of whom we have yet to learn? It is not wizardry, but power far older, a power that walked the earth. Ere elf sang or hammer rang, ere iron was found or tree was hewn, when young was mountain under moon, ere ring was made or rout was woe, it walked the forest long ago. And what may be the answer to your riddle? Says Theoden. If you would learn that, you should come with me to Isengard, answered Gandalf. So, to Isengard we go. Although there's this tension around it because we think that, well, there's tension around going to Isengard because we think we have this big battle with Saruman there. But Gandalf says, what is it? Gandalf says something to more or less like hint that it won't be a battle, just a conversation, and Theoden is like, okay, I'm coming with, I'm not stopping now, but I do need to rest first. So Gandalf, so we rest, we mourn, we start to build Helm's Deep back up and bury the fallen before we head off. Repair it. Repair is the word I was looking for. And then in the afternoon, we plan to depart. So it's King Theoden, Éomer, about 20 of the Rohirrim riders. Something just hit my window. Gandalf, of course. And then we have Legolas and Gimli and Aragorn. So we, of course, have our natural crew added in. We're keeping Éomer and Theoden, right? We're keeping Éomer? Or did he send Éomer home? I think we do. The fanhorn trees are like Forrest and Macbeth. Okay. I thought I had highlighted who we were bringing. Nevertheless. Okay, yes. To ride with him to Isengard, the king chose Éomer and 20 men of his household. That's right. Okay, I did remember correctly. Okay. So Gimli goes on. I'm not going to read it, but Gimli has this little passionate moment about the caves at Helm's Deep, which I think is really beautiful. We get to see this like really passionate, beautiful side of a dwarf's heart, but also just of Gimli. We get to see more of the beautiful friendship of Legolas and Gimli, which again is like a friendship for the ages. And oh, this is right. This is perfect. Okay, so as they rode from under, so we had gone through the woods, right? The woods that we had seen the orcs go into and none had returned. So we do go into the woods. Legolas, and as we're on our way out, Legolas halts, looks back with regret, and gave a sudden cry. There are eyes looking out from the shadows of the boughs. I never saw such eyes before. The others, surprised by his cry, halted and turned, but Legolas started to ride back. No, no, cried Gimli, do as you please in your madness, but let me first get down from this horse. I wish to see no eyes. I remember reading The Fellowship for the first time. I was in hospital with pneumonia. I was around 12. The young nurse noticed the book and asked where it was in the book. Gandalf had just fallen. She said, "So are you sad about it? Were you sad about it?" It's quite long, Andrew. Otherwise I would. But I do appreciate the Gimli passion, but it is quite long. But it's important to note we did see the Gimli passion, or that the Gimli passion was there. Okay. So, right, Legolas wants to go back into this. Gandalf stops him. Stay, Legolas Greenleaf. Do not go back into the wood. Not yet. Now is not your time. Even as he spoke, there came forward out of the trees 3 strange shapes, as tall as trolls they were, 12 feet or more in height. Their strong bodies, stout as young trees, seemed to be clad with raiment or with hide of close-fitting gray and brown. Their limbs were long, and their hands had many fingers. Their hair was stiff, and their beards gray-green as moss. They gazed out with solemn eyes, but they were not looking at the riders. Their eyes were bent northward. So we see what Gandalf calls herdsmen. They are shepherds of the trees. It is so long since you listened to the tales by the fireside. You have seen Ents, O king, Ents out of Fangorn forest, which in your tongue you call the Entwood. And the king was silent. Ents? Out of the shadows of legend, I begin a little to understand the marvel of the trees, I think. No dwarf could be unmoved by such loveliness. Tolkien cures pneumonia. Nice. You know, I did see someone said they were sick this week and that they were like, well, it gives me a lot of time to read The Hobbit. And I was like, you know, yeah, surely. Surely it does. So I thought that was beautiful. We see, obviously, we knew that the forest hadn't been there before, but like it still was this little mysterious thing. And so the conclusion of that for this part of the book is, in my opinion, quite beautiful. But as you know, I'm a huge freaking fan of the Ents. Probably their #1 fan. And Dar had put this in the community section. So just a little history on the Ents too. The Ents were created at the request of Yavanna, the Vala whose domain is growing things, plants. She was afraid that the elves, dwarves, and men, when they appeared, would do great harm to her work. So she went to Iru Iluvatar and asked him for help. He agreed and created them to be protectors of growing things before creating the elves. Fascinating. I'm not even familiar with who Yavanna is, but that's when Gandalf tells Theoden that he's about to meet the oldest living being in Middle-earth. He is right. Treebeard was the oldest of the Ents. It also explains the Ents' anger towards Saruman. He's hurting on a huge scale, the very thing they were specifically made to protect. From that point of view, he must be stopped. Finally, it shows Tolkien's animosity towards industrialization. He really disliked the spread of industrial activity into rural England. All of the evil or damaged places in Middle-earth are industrial kind of landscapes. Mordor, Isengard after Saruman, to some degree Moria, and others not yet seen in our readings. While the best and safest places are more rural or natural types of areas, the Shire and Lothlorien come to mind. Yeah, and both the Shire and Lothlorien are such beautifully created parts of Middle-earth, and the way they're written is with so much love and reverence, and that comes across. So that all makes a lot of sense to me. Sure it was, but she knew. Legolas, come, let us make this bargain. If we both return safe out of the perils that awaits us, we will journey for a while together. Gandalf is cryptic again. Technically, he's older than Treebeard. In his spirit form, Gandalf isn't that old. Are you sure about that? Content from the Silmarillion. Yavanna is, etc. Content from the Silmarillion. Thank you, Andrew. Yavanna is one of the Valor, equivalent to archangels. Oh, I'm interested to know more about. So, wizards versus Ents history. Okay, so we take a rest for a night. We find that the river is dead. But then during the night, it starts to move. Someone says, Éomer says, this has become a dreary place. What sickness has befallen the river? Many fair things Saruman has destroyed. Has he devoured the springs of Isen too? So it would seem, said Gandalf. Oh, so this is where we learned that, so when Gandalf had left us, he had gone back to join Erkenbrand because he knew that Saruman had dispatched his full strength against Helm's Deep, and his servants had turned aside from all other errands and gone to Helm's Deep. The land seemed empty of enemies, yet Gandalf feared that wolf riders and plunderers might ride nonetheless to Medusled while it was unfended. So Gandalf had this little bit of wisdom to like go back and find Erkenbrand and help out there, in which he did. And obviously we know that he makes it back to the Helm's Deep. And we're going to Isengard. Uther, welcome in, welcome in. I'm so glad. Welcome in. We're currently going through the road to Isengard. The end battle at Isengard so far is only hinted at. Yes. Yes. Correct, Eric. But the Huron are also wild and dangerous, like the natural world can be. Yet I feared the wolf riders and plunderers might ride nonetheless. Yes, an attack on Edoras was planned for the movie. Oh. Okay. I know some of you are in an ad, so I'll catch my brain up. Okay, so we have all this like foreboding about getting to Isengard. We see smoke. We come across this. We rest for the night, right? And when we're resting, these shadows, away south upon the Hornburg, in the middle of the night, men heard a great noise. A wind in the valley, and the ground trembled, and all were afraid, and no one ventured to go forth. But in the morning they went out and were amazed, for the slain orcs were gone, and the trees also. Far down into the valley of the deep, the grass was crushed and trampled brown, as if giant herdsmen had pastured great droves of cattle there. But a mile below, a huge pit had been delved in the earth, and over it stones were piled into a hill. Men believed that the orcs whom they had slain were buried there, but whether those who had fled into the wood were with them, none could say. For no man ever set foot upon that hill. The Death Down, it was afterward called. The king and his company slept no more that night, but they saw and heard no other strange things, save one. The voice of the river beside them suddenly awoke. There was a rush of water hurrying down among the stones, and when it had passed, the Isen flowed and bubbled in its bed again, as it had ever done. There also was, and then late in the night, this is before all of this, a watchman cried out, and all awoke. The moon was gone, stars were shining above, but over the ground there crept a darkness, blacker than the night. On both sides of the river it rolled towards them, going northward. Stay where you are, said Gandalf. Draw no weapons, wait, and it will pass you by. So, I'm assuming those are ends. Again. One of my favorite differences between the books and the movies is how short Helm's Deep is compared to the 20-minute long film sequence. Uther, we were talking about that. And isn't that so... It's so true. And I'm of two minds about it, because part of me is grateful that there wasn't this long, drawn-out, wordy battle. But then on the other hand, it almost made it seem like the battle was easy, even though it simply was not. To me, it shows that the books are far less concerned with the action. I love that take, and more with the characters and themes. The violence is treated almost dispassionately and lamentable. You know what? You just nailed that on the head. That is so beautifully said. The books are not about the action. And that's why we have all these moments of this relationship building, and we get all these beautiful moments between Gimli and Legolas, and Aragorn and Éomer, and Gandalf and Theoden. Yeah, actually, that perspective is kind of groundbreaking for my perception of the book. Okay, so we see all of this the night we rest. we carry on. We have no idea what's going to happen as we come up to Isengard. We get this, again, some of Tolkien's most beautiful description work. I love that he gives us this moment to understand what Isengard should look like. We get this beautiful description of it being this like strong, tall building and this wall around it with only one entry in. No, you're totally fine, Huther. Yes, the movies needed more cooking and food. It's in the books. I think the movies stand on their own. I think it's okay for them to be a little different this way and that way. So we see the tower. There stood a tower of marvelous shape. We understand this was Orthanc, the citadel of Saruman, the name of which had by design or chance a twofold meaning. For in the Elvish speech, Orthanc signifies Mount Fang, but in the language of the Mark of old, the cunning mind. A strong place and wonderful was Isengard, and long it had been beautiful. But Saruman had slowly shaped it to his shifting purpose and made it better, as he thought, being deceived. This was the stronghold of Saruman, as fame reported it, for within living memory, the men of Rohan had not passed its gates. So again, we get this like really strong description of Isengard, and then as we're riding up to it, we come to the doors of Isengard, but the doors lay hurled and twisted on the ground, and all about, stone cracked and splintered into countless jagged shards, was scattered far and wide and piled in ruinous heaps. The great arch still stood, but it opened now upon a roofless chasm. And the ring beyond was filled with steaming water. So this silences the company. And perceiving that the power of Saruman was overthrown. There they saw, close beside them, a great rubble heap, and suddenly they were aware of two small figures. Obviously, this is Merry and Pip, but I love the way we're reintroduced or we're introduced to Merry and Pip in this scene, right? And Wilde had noted that it's this beautiful juxtaposition between this really serious group and then this very unserious and like goofy, relaxed hobbits, technically. So we're greeted to Isengard by Merry, and he says, "The Lord Saruman is within, but at the moment he is closeted with one warm tongue, or doubtless he would be here to welcome such honorable guests." "Doubtless he would," laughed Gandalf. "And was it Saruman that ordered you to guard his damaged doors and watch for the arrival of guests with your attention, when your attention could be spared from plate and bottle? No, good sir. Our orders came from Treebeard, who has taken over the management of Isengard. He commanded me to welcome the Lord of Rohan with fitting words. I have done my best." As much as I'd love John Rhys Davies waxing lyrical about the glittering caves for an hour, I feel that a wider audience might not. Merry and my companion, who alas is overcome with weariness, here he gave the other a dig with his foot. The sadness of the destruction contrasted with the happiness of seeing our friends again. Yes. Yeah. And, it ladders up to the destruction was a necessary part of starting to take down Saruman. Of course, we don't read past Isengard today, the road to Isengard, so we won't know what happened until next week. But nevertheless, there's still a little bit between this interaction. So of course we have this reunion of also Legolas and Gimli with Merry and Pip. And what about your companions? What about Legolas and me? Cried Gimli, unable to contain himself longer. You rascals, you woolly-footed and wool-padded truants. A fine hunt you have led us, 200 leagues through fen and forest, battle and death to rescue you. And here we find you feasting and idling and smoking. Smoking! Where did you come by the weed, you villains? Hammer and tongs, I am so torn between rage and joy, that if I do not burst, it will be a marvel. You speak for me, Gimli, laughed Legolas, though I would sooner learn how they came by the wine. And so it's this very like passionate, like there is truth to like the frustration, right? That like they put themselves through all of this. They just did this in very intense battle, and here are their two friends who they started this part of the journey for, was to find Merry and Pip, and here they are just relaxing, taking a smoke. We're only reading little bits and pieces. We don't read the whole thing. We just read little bits and pieces. But hey, they found them. Poor Gimli, the mother hen. I love Gimli. It is adorable. I agree. This is where Gimli's comic relief actually fits in, you think, Pedro? See, I'm a fan of Gimli's comic relief. I truly think if you took out Gimli's comic relief, the story would be too serious. It would take itself too seriously. The story is already very serious, and it already takes itself very seriously. But I've always been a fan of a good jokester in a story. We find our friends. Gandalf asks, okay, yes. So, Gandalf asks if Treebeard had left a message for him, and Merry chides him and is like, I was coming to it, but I have been hindered by many other questions. I was to say that if the Lord of the Mark and Gandalf will ride to the northern wall, they will find Treebeard there, and he will welcome them. I may add that they will also find food of the best there. It was discovered and selected by your humble servants. So we leave pretty much on that note. We know that Gandalf and Theoden, King Theoden, are going to go have a conversation with Treebeard. Gandalf tells Theoden, when you see Treebeard, you will learn much, for Treebeard is Fangorn, and the eldest and chief of the Ents. And when you speak with him, you will hear the speech of the oldest of all living things. And that's the end of our sections for this week. And Legolas wouldn't have anyone to talk to, and it wouldn't be the friendship we know and love. Gimli is very much a warrior poet, yeah. But I stand firm in that comedic integration does not take away from strength. And that Gimli's character is still just as strong and just as much of a warrior as Legolas, maybe not as much of a warrior as Aragorn, but can anyone really be as much of a warrior as Aragorn in their own right? Sure. But yeah, I stand firm in my position there. To clarify, I understand why Gimli is the comic relief in the movies and find him funny, and without him the movie would be too dark. I still like to see some tougher moments too. And you're fair to feel that. You're fair to feel that. And I always like to remind in these moments that, like, just because I have a differing opinion and voice it does not in any way mean that your opinions or your feelings on how this story is experienced in your mind doesn't make it any less valid. All in all, each experience is going to be its own valid and different thing, and there's space for that. Nope, nobody can match Aragorn. the movies do need to do more with less. It's very true. Yeah. Yeah, that's why I feel like there's erasure of certain characters, and you know, I really, because I enjoyed the movies so much, I truly do feel that I have this deep trust that like they did it doing the best that they could and with the best intentions that they could. You know, I just always have an open heart for that. But again, it should be noted, my first time reading the books. So, and I'm so grateful you all joined me for this journey, whether it's your first time reading the books too, or it's your 50th time reading the books. I appreciate all of the perspectives, and I'm so happy to go on this journey together. Speaking of this journey, next week, Monday the 20th, we meet again. We finish book 3. So we have 3 chapters to read for next week: Flotsam and Jetsam, The Voice of Saruman, and the Plantier. My unpopular movie opinion is that I think I like movie Aragon more than the book version, even though they're you think they're very different? Like I wrote before, if the books would be adapted 100%, it would be a really boring 50-hour-long movie with 5,000 characters. Yep. I agree with that. Yep. Hobbits and Rohirrim may share a homeland on the Upper Anduin. Ooh. The Voice of Saruman might be my favorite overall chapter of book 3. Well. I look forward to reading it then. That'll be next week. Same time, 5 p.m. The live is already scheduled. Although, like today, I apologize for having to move the live over to this link. We had technical difficulties. Here, let me share the link here so you can go hit that notify button for next week's live. Did I send that? Oh, I did. Okay, weird. Movie Aragon had to give him a more directly relatable motivation. Book Aragon is so wrapped up in the history that it can feel difficult to relate to him. Yeah. Not that I don't love his book version as well. They're meant to do different things. Yeah, that's totally fair and true. I do my best to stay partial or impartial, because definitely having watched the movies first, I have a certain, like, I suppose I haven't considered this position because I have kind of implanted movie Aragon onto book Aragon, and I do my best to dissect it as we go, but sometimes there's just things that stay stuck there. Yeah, and we'll get into Aragon in next week, Kelly. We will. Okay, that's it for this week though. So next week we've got those 3 chapters. We're ending book 3 of the 2 Towers, and then also next Saturday in Discord we have the Lord of the Rings movie marathon, all 3 extended editions, so 12 hours and some change of movies in a day. That is this Saturday after what's that holiday? Thanksgiving in America, in the States. So just so you know, you may have family things. I totally understand. But if you want to join, definitely hop into the Discord. There is a link in the community section here on YouTube. And this weekend, my reaction to Five Nights at Freddy is going up here on this YouTube channel, and then starting the 25th, will be starting my reactions to the Hobbit movie series. So if you want more Lord of the Rings content, book club every Monday, the Hobbit starting the 25th. We might do Sunday though, since we're doing movie day in Discord on that Saturday. I might change it. I might change the release to Sunday, but that's neither here nor there at this moment. I'll see you next week. I'm so happy you got to join as well, Huther. Thank you, everyone. It means the world. I love book club, and I'm so grateful you guys joined me for this and are experiencing my first time reading this book with me and me with you. I'll see you next week. Be good.